You're watching the Press Row, and we're talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm Mike Sherman here with the Oklahoman columnist John Rohde, Barry Trammell, and Jenny Carlson. Guys, here's a phrase you might be hearing from some of the most hopeful Thunder fans or from those who predicted great things for Oklahoma City's NBA team. If the playoffs started today, the Thunder would be in. Now, we're only 11 games in, but what do we know about this team that can't be dismissed by another phrase? It's early.
So the NBA season's shorter than college football now.
Well, no, what I'm saying is the question.
If the playoffs started today.
It's true. You can go look it up right now. If the playoffs started today, they'd be in. They'd be the number 7 team. But, Jenny, what do we know right now about them that's fair to conclude?
Well, I think it's an improved team. I think we can safely say that. This is a team that's better than they were a year ago. These wins that they're having, they're not flukes. It's not like they're beating teams that left half the team home or something like that. Granted, they've had some wins when some teams have been shorthanded. Orlando pops to mind immediately, but they're competing and beating teams legitimately. So I think we can safely say it's early, or they're better even though it's early. But I will say this. It's still a work in progress, guys, because we see these ebbs and flows, these times when they're not winning games that you say, why aren't they beating the Clippers? Why aren't they winning that game? So I think we can also say it's still a work in progress.
Well, what I noticed the most difference from last year to this, last year if the Thunder was up with 6 minutes left, they'd help the other team up. They'd get them up off the floor and pat them on the back and say, hang in there. This year they're trying to step on their throat, and they have done so, and they did it last night, Barry in Miami. So once they get ahead, they're finishing the job far more frequently, far more impressively.
They got some things that are markedly different, in my opinion. Kevin Durant is better this year. He's a better scorer than he was last year, and he was a heck of a scorer last year. Russell Westbrook, even though he has his off nights, is a better point guard. His assists are way up, his turnovers are down a little bit, and he's scoring a little bit more. He's a better player. Sefolosha and Kristich, much more comfortable than when they came in midseason last year. Tell you, Kristich is turning into a center I can sort of stand to live with. He scores, he gets in the way on defense, he grabs some rebounds. I mean, he's turning into a pretty solid NBA center. So they're just individual guys noticeably better, and the product obviously put together is producing more victories.
One nagging thing, one curious thing is why they can't win at home the way they can win on the road. They have now beaten 3 teams that were in last year's playoffs on the road, last night in Miami, in Detroit, in San Antonio. They got another one Wednesday night in Orlando, and they're playing without Jameer Nelson now. So what's going on with this home road deal?
I still think it goes back to this whole idea that they're still a work in progress. I mean, I don't know why you could go on the road and beat a team that, you probably shouldn't, quote unquote, beat, but maybe it's just get away from home and you're sort of insulated to the team and you're really focused on what you're doing. You're not thinking about what you've got to do, run and do this errand or do this thing. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's that these guys who are still young and developing focus more when they're on the road.
As dumb as it sounds, there might be more pressure at home. There's certainly more fans at home than on the road. Last night, Miami looked, 2/3 full at the most, and not much is expected of the Thunder on the road, so there's really not that pressure atmosphere. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's something to that. I think 2 things. One, I think sometimes the players relax a little bit too much at the Ford Center, maybe waiting on the crowd euphoria to carry them along. And number 2, as good of a home crowd as they've got, which is very good, it's not what it was with the Hornets in terms of excitement in the building and just the overall the explosiveness in terms of just somebody does something, the roof pops. The euphoria is not as great as it was. You still got to play. And I'm not sure. I know that against the Clippers, they came out very, very poorly. Against the Lakers, they came out very poorly. They're just not getting with it at the start. They rally and they get going. But they're going to have to realize you got to bring it even at home. Because the same thing that the Thunder's doing to teams on the road, teams are coming into the Ford Center and doing to the Thunder.
Interesting. Friday night, the Thunder's got an interesting challenge. Brandon Jennings, the high school player, went over to Europe and came back and is he's rubbing the double nickel on teams now. He scored 55 last weekend, which brings us to another question. My friend Don, the business writer, has got a new nickname for Thabo Sefolosha. He calls him the Cooler. Does the Cooler get Brandon Jennings on Friday night? And more importantly, Does the cooler get serious consideration for Defensive Player of the Year, John?
Well, usually you go with a shot blocker, and I think Greg Oden is leading the candidacy maybe this year. And Thabo is not a shot blocker, but what he does do is he gets the toughest guy, and he shuts him down better than just about anybody else in the league. And he doesn't have the offensive numbers that you look at. You look at him for one reason, defense, so maybe that would help his cause.
Well, and I think if the Thunder keep winning, I think some of these awards become more likely if they're a team mired towards the bottom of the standings. You know, All-Star and, Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, those sort of things become a lot more difficult for guys to win. But I tell you what, the thing about Thabo Sefolosha that I think will at least get him some looks, guys, is that I wouldn't be surprised if he guards Brandon Jennings. He's got a range of positions and types of players that he can guard. I mean, you go from Kobe to Jennings, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade. These are all guys that he can guard. And I think at some point you start to lay out those numbers and how he did against those guys. I think it's going to be a pretty impressive numbers out there.
He's a wonderful defensive player. He's got no chance at the award, though. He's got three things against him. One, he's a defender, as John said, who doesn't block shots, doesn't have the stats, so he's not going to get it. Two, he's playing in Oklahoma City. We know Thabo Sefolosha, but a whole lot of people around the league have no idea where he's at or how he's doing. And three, he doesn't have much offense. And NBA defensive awards often are sort of like baseball's gold gloves. You win them with your bat. So until he scores more, people are not going to take him seriously on the defensive end for awards.
Finally, guys, the question. It's an early question, but Jenny, how many wins did you predict for the Thunder?
I think I had them with 37.
John?
35, I think.
38.
I said 40. Now, does this look like it might be a playoff team? Jenny?
More so now than when it was in the preseason and we were just kind of guessing. But everything is a first with this team. You know, how they deal with success, this is a first. If they're in the playoff hunt, how they deal with that is a first. So I still think they're going to struggle to get there just because they've never been in that position before. It would take a monumental leap not only in wins but in sort of mindset and mentality. I think they've got the potential more now than I thought at the beginning of the year, but I still think they're a year away.
Well, the good news is their schedule is pretty front-loaded, so if they're doing well early, you hope they do well late, but they're 1/8 of the way through. I think you're just popping off because you can right now, personally. And Barry, look at some of the teams we thought were borderline playoff teams like Phoenix, and they're playing great. So if you look at the whole equation, there are a lot of good teams, too many good teams in the West.
I think they're going to stay in the playoff hunt most of the season, just like the Hornets did with us for 2 years. But to actually contend seriously, they're going to need some help from the West. That 7 and 8 spot's going to have to come down into the 41-40 win range. Last couple of years, it's been in the 48, 49, 50 range. So that's what's going to have to happen. People like Phoenix, Utah, people like that are going to have to come down and be stuck around the 40, 42 win mark. Maybe the Thunder can get up there with them. That's the only way.
Okay, the New Orleans Hornets are coming down. They look like they're in disintegration mode. But that's all for this pop-off edition of the Press Row. You can stay with the best coverage team anywhere on News OK and every morning in the Oklahoman.